And keeping with our sort of year in review theme, this is our first episode of 2020, which is weird for me to say 2020. Can't believe it's 2020. I always think of the 20s being like the roaring 20s of the 1920s, not 2020. But anyway,
I keep thinking we should have a watch tick 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 running in the background if you're going to be talking about 2020.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I grew up watching that and stuff. Keeping with our sort of year in review theme and predictions, I thought we would talk about our personal experiences from 2019 with the streaming wars. And what I'm talking about is you and I have both subscribed to various streaming channels, and we kind of have had our personal experiences with it. So I wanted to talk to you about what streaming services you've acquired in the last year. And also, I believe you got rid of some this year too. So I kind of want to hear your take on how the streaming wars has affected you. What has been your experience with these various streaming platforms that you've subscribed to?
Okay, so to start off with, the streaming service that I got rid of was the DC Universe, primarily just because while I enjoyed a lot of the shows and was excited about Swamp Thing and stuff, I decided to get rid of it just because while waiting for episodes of Swamp Thing, I hated the fact that Swamp Thing wasn't going to get a second season. It wasn't going to get a third season. It had already been canceled, and it was my favorite thing on the service. My second favorite thing on the service was actually the comics. And I really liked having that library of comics, even though apparently that's why some of my work I've been working on is no longer out in trade, and I'm not seeing royalty checks for it. But that's another story for another time. I am not bitter. Well, I'm not too bitter about that. But anyhow, no, I found reading some of the comics and stuff on the service to be frustrating. And that was the main thing I kind of enjoyed the most that was actually on the DC Universe app. And I actually bought a different device and thinking that I could read them on that, and then it wouldn't work correctly with a different device. And then I had a hell of a time trying to get it to stream to my Samsung television because the DC Universe, for some reason, isn't supported on every device for you to stream and view it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's got something to do with the fact that AT&T, owns Warner's, and they want you to do it through an AT&T product, or I don't know. Anyhow, I found the whole thing frustrating. So the reason I got rid of the DC Universe app and the service was not because I was disappointed with the shows. I liked them just fine. I didn't think they were all great, but like Doom Patrol was a lot of fun. I enjoyed Doom Patrol, and I was quite enjoying Swamp Thing. But my favorite thing on there was the comics, and I just found reading the comics and streaming the shows was just incredibly difficult, and it really got annoying. I bought a second Chromecast to hook up to the TV. The only thing I couldn't get to cast or stream on the TV was the DC Universe stuff.
Oh, wow.
And
you couldn't Chromecast it.
Yeah, well, eventually I did get it to work, but I'm annoyed by the idea that it reminds me of having all the remote controls where you got like 6 remote controls. This controls this controls that. It felt like the same kind of thing, and it just was really bothering me. And at the end of the day, that's the reason I canceled the DC Universe app. And I feel kind of bad about it. I mean, I'm a DC, through and through fanboy, but not being able to easily cast it to my television, having issues trying to read the comics on my different devices, like on my phone, it would skip pages too easy. And when I got another device, it was unsupported. I couldn't even put the app on it. I just got really frustrated. So literally, I had to buy all this stuff to try and make it work, and it still didn't work right. So that's why I got rid of the DC Universe app.
So you're saying that the quality of the app itself is bad?
Well, the quality of the app is good if you're on a device that it works on. But when you're I'm being serious. It's like a lot of it would work really good on my phone, except for the comics reading experience, because you're trying to flip one page and it would go 2, or you'd be trying to do this enhanced viewing mode and it would skip panels, and it takes you out of the story you're reading, and that's what I didn't like. And then, like I said, all the issues with streaming it just got frustrating. And then when I bought a device thinking, and I looked into it and I thought it was supposed to work and I thought it'd be fine. And you could say, well, that's your fault for not researching it better. But I thought it was going to be fine. And I bought the thing and it wasn't even supported. And then I ended up renewing my subscription to Comixology Unlimited, and I just started reading stuff on Comixology on this new device. And I just don't. And ironically enough, I've not been reading a lot of DC stuff. I've been reading. We were working on reading the Picard comic. I'm an issue behind, but I think my surprise that my surprise I enjoyed was actually that Green Lantern Year One. I was kind of surprised at how much I liked that. I didn't think I was going to enjoy that one. I did buy that one, but it's just on the Comixology on the device it works fine. But for some reason, the DC Universe app, it was just it logged in fine, and it seemed like it would work good. And I tried to interact with some of the people like in the community and stuff, and I just don't think the DC Universe app is living up to what I think people wanted or intended it to be. And that's my personal perspective. I could be totally wrong, but I don't have a lot of friends. I don't know a lot of people that are also using it. So I'm not sure, I don't know. We'll see. But I'd have to say that's the one I got rid of, and it's just because it was frustrating me. The cost wasn't an issue. The quality of the content wasn't an issue. I quite liked it. But I was just having a lot of issues with getting certain aspects of it to work in a reliable manner, and it just got really frustrating for me. So,
was cost a factor as well?
No. Cost wasn't a factor at all. I think it was like $7.99 a month or something like that. I mean, it wasn't very expensive, and when you look at the comics library alone, it was worth it. But the other thing that bothered me too is the fact that they're doing like what Netflix does, where there's a period of time, there's certain DC movies that are available on there, and then they pull them off, and then they rotate other movies on. I don't know if that's a limitation of how their service works or whatever, but I thought that was kind of weird. It's like I felt like you should have all the DC stuff on there all the time, but
yeah,
I guess either manufactured or real scarcity needs to be a thing. I don't know. It's weird. I don't understand why some of these services do that unless it's a limitation of what they can provide on their end in terms of their pipeline and infrastructure. But I thought that was weird because there were certain movies I thought for sure would be on there that are not. And then there was other things I thought would not be on there that is. So it's kind of weird. But yeah, at the end of the day, I got rid of the DC Universe app because I felt like that it was just frustrating me, and I didn't feel like it was working the way in which I personally wanted it to work.
Right.
But that's me personally. So that's the one I got rid of. Out of curiosity, was there a streaming service that maybe you got rid of or that you were curious about, you decided against this last year?
Well, actually, I've done quite a few. Well, not quite a few, but I've done several trials, free trials. In fact, I did the Disney Plus trial, and then I recently did YouTube TV. I did that because I wanted to watch some of the bowl games, and I don't have cable. And YouTube TV is kind of what we've been talking about, where I think the streaming wars is going to ultimately go. I think it's going to be platforms like YouTube TV, because what YouTube TV has is tons of cable channels like ESPN. They have, I think, TBS, TNT. They have, I think they have Hulu also. So they actually have some streaming services within their service.
Right.
So I kind of like, that's been my prediction for a while now, that I think ultimately that's where the streaming wars are going to wind up. But I decided not to continue with it because it's kind of expensive. It's like $40 a month. So it's basically cable all over again. And that's kind of where I think that's kind of my prediction too, is like and I've been saying that. I've been consistent all year with that. I think that's where the streaming wars are going to go. I don't know if they're going to necessarily go there in 2020. I'm thinking maybe like 2021, 2022. That's when you're going to start seeing some consolidation. But I do think that kind of the YouTube TV is kind of the future. But I'm not very happy with it because I think it's expensive. There is a lot of content. There's no doubt that there's a lot of content. The other interesting thing is that the YouTube TV, my primary way of watching streaming content is on my PlayStation 4. And there is no YouTube TV PlayStation 4 app. So that's another reason I didn't really like it. So what I had to do was I had to cast it on my phone. I have a Chromecast.
Yeah. Annoying, isn't it?
Yeah. So I had to cast it from my phone. So yeah, I decided I did the free trial, and I decided not to pick it up. There is, like I said, there is a lot of content, but ultimately for me, it's cost. And that's actually kind of my thing with the streaming wars in general, is I think cost is really a big factor for me because, you know, it adds up over time. Even when you talk about a subscription that's only like, you know, $7 a month or whatever, it does add up over time, especially if you're talking years, you know,
Right.
because, you know, I've had Netflix for years. You know, I've had Netflix basically ever since they started streaming. That's why I became a cord cutter. I became a cord cutter before they came up with the term. And that's why, because I was like, hey, I've got Netflix and I've got internet. How can I really justify having cable as well? You know?
Right.
So, and I also use an antenna. I'm a big antenna guy. I always talk about having an antenna. I use an antenna. So I get a lot of the broadcast channels and things like that. Although I don't get CW anymore, which is weird. But yeah, so, you know, for me, cost is a big factor. And that was why I decided not to continue with YouTube TV. But I also want to mention that one thing that's kind of interesting with that is the reason I decided to get YouTube TV in the first place was I talked to you about how I recently went ahead and got the Disney bundle. I got Disney Plus with ESPN Plus and Hulu. And
right.
I mentioned to you that I was having a good experience with Hulu because there's a lot of anime on there, and my kids like anime. We were watching it together. I don't like the fact that I'm paying for a service where I have ads. It's another thing I don't like, which of course YouTube TV is full of that because a lot of them are cable channels, you know, so it's full of ads. So I don't quite like that, but for the most part, I'm having a good experience with Hulu. You know, Disney Plus itself, I've told you, I've had some major issues on the PlayStation 4. I keep having, and to this day, I'm still having that issue where it freezes in the middle of a show, and the audio continues. And I've actually sent, you know, like Twitter posts to Disney, and they've responded to me, but they're not doing anything. I mean, it's been months, you know, since the launch of Disney Plus, and there are still issues with the PS4 app. And you know, I get comments sometimes when I go on Twitter and talk about this where people are like, well, it's because the PlayStation 4 sucks. Well, guess what? None of the other streaming services have that problem. I don't have that problem with Netflix. I don't have that problem with Crackle. I don't have that problem with Tubi. I don't have that problem with any of the other streaming services that I have on my PlayStation 4. It's just the one. And then with ESPN Plus, I was really disappointed in their content. Really disappointed because the whole reason I got the bundle was so I could watch the college bowl games. I was thinking I could watch them, and ESPN's marketing for ESPN Plus is very deceptive. It's very deceptive because the way it works is there isn't an ESPN Plus app. There's no such thing. There is an ESPN app. Okay. Now, the way the ESPN app works is like a lot of these other cable channels that have a streaming component, like, say, HBO Now, things like that. The way it works is you basically use your cable provider information or your satellite provider information to log into the account. You're familiar with that, right? That kind of setup?
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, ESPN Plus is its own content within the ESPN app. So when you go on the ESPN app, it's going to show you, like, say, you know, like yesterday, it'll show the Rose Bowl. You know what I mean? In the ESPN app. Click on the Rose Bowl. You need your provider information. And you're kind of sitting there like, but I have ESPN Plus. Then you realize there is an ESPN Plus tab. Okay? You press on the tab, and it's like a bunch of 30 by 30 episodes. And it's like, what? Right. That's what I'm paying for? I mean, the ESPN Plus isn't like super expensive, and of course it's cheaper with the bundle, but it's like, that's what I'm paying for? Apparently they're promoting a McGregor fight that's coming up for UFC, and I do like UFC, but I've heard there's issues with that too, where like it's like they'll advertise fights, and then it turns out it's actually pay-per-view, because you can do pay-per-view through the ESPN Plus app. So then you end up having to pay more on top of what you're paying already. And I'm like, this is really deceptive marketing and a really shame on ESPN, you know, and Disney, because this is a Disney company. It's really a shameful tactic, in my opinion, because I was very disappointed. Right. And that's why I ended up doing the free trial for YouTube TV, was so I could watch the bowl games, which there were some great ones this last couple of days. Yeah, so I'm very disappointed in the ESPN Plus app. I think it's it's very deceptive with the marketing. The fact that it doesn't have its own dedicated app, and you get to see all this other great stuff that's on ESPN, but you can't watch it even though you're paying.
Right.
You know,
right? Yeah,
it's like they're toying with you. It's really weird.
yeah,
So they got to fix that. They got to do something with that. Like at least have like its own dedicated app or something. I mean, they got to fix that, and they got to be more, I think, transparent with the marketing. That hey, you know, this is very limited content. Like I think there's a lot of soccer stuff on there and some other
right.
things that I'm just not interested in. You know, I was interested in college football, and I do like UFC, and I guess there is supposed to be some more UFC content coming up. But I don't know. I was really disappointed in it, and that's what led me to get do the trial with YouTube TV in the first place. So I've kind of had a very I don't know. I haven't had a very good experience, I guess, is what it comes down to. I like the content of Disney Plus. You know, I like having the vault. I like having all the Star Wars films. Although I wish they had the theatrical versions. I think they should do that. You know, it would be nice if they had for the original trilogy, if they had the theatrical releases, because they are significantly different. It would be nice if they had the Ewoks cartoon, Droids cartoon, the Ewok movies, the Clone War movie. Clone War movies not on there either. Things like that. In the Clone War cartoon animated movie, they don't have that on there, as far as I know, unless it's packaged with the Clone War series. And I don't think it is. I think it would be separate. So I might be wrong on that, but I haven't found it. So, but you know, content is not bad on Disney Plus. Obviously, we've been reviewing The Mandalorian. Overall, my impression of The Mandalorian has been positive. It's not like my favorite, but it's been positive. I love Baby Yoda. So it's kind of a mixed bag for me because, you know, on the one side, I think the Disney bundle on its face seems to me that it would be the winner of 2019 because it seems like on the face of it, you're getting a ton of content for a fairly reasonable price. You know, you're getting essentially 3 streaming services. But when you really get into it, like that ESPN Plus app is kind of worthless. Unless you're very specific, like if you're a big soccer fan, it'd be good, right? But it's kind of deceptive. So I'm hoping Disney's going to fix that for 2020, and they're going to put some more content on ESPN Plus. At least maybe get rid of some of the deceptive marketing, so people can kind of understand what they're really getting. Because it's really weird. It's really weird that it's all on the same app. That to me is the really deceptive part of it, because you're literally when you first pull it up, you're seeing all this great stuff that you can't access.
Right.
And it's strange. It's deceptive. But at the same time, even with all that, I kind of think Disney Plus bundle is kind of the winner of 2019 for me. I think that's going to be a big selling point. I think some people are going to be angry like me with the ESPN Plus content. But I do think that kind of has the potential, and I think it kind of is the winner right now for me of 2019.
Well, interesting.
It's funny saying that with my issues with it, you know?
Right. No, yeah. Well, here's the thing. As we've moved further into using the Disney Plus app, I think it's a great addition to the streaming wars. I'm quite enjoying it. I absolutely love The Mandalorian. I don't have we'll be talking about the last episode here in just a little bit, but The Mandalorian for me is probably the best Star Wars we've gotten in a long time. That's my personal opinion. I'm really enjoying it. Of course, I was already a huge Boba Fett fan, so even though it's not Boba Fett, it kind of is Boba Fett, so I'm down.
Exactly.
So I'm really enjoying it. Having said that, and here's where things are going to go sideways. For me, 2020 is going to be a tie between Amazon Prime and Hulu. The reason for this is I feel like the breadth of content and all this crazy fun stuff I like to watch, because I have such diverse tastes, I find I'm spending more time on Amazon Prime and more time on Hulu. I just am. My only gripe with Hulu is that for some reason we're having an issue with it, where Hulu will just decide every once in a while, you're done, and it just cuts itself. It just closes. Yeah, it just closes.
That's annoying.
But but no, yeah, I mean, my wife watches a lot of stuff on Hulu, so therefore I watch a lot of stuff on Hulu.
Do you do Hulu with ads or without ads?
We have Hulu with ads because she renewed it at one point and decided that we could suffer through the ads, but originally I was paying the higher price to not suffer through the ads, but whatever. That's a discussion for another time.
But do you feel, I'm just curious, does that upset you at all? Because it does me. I don't like paying for ads.
I don't like paying for ads either, and I think the ads are actually part of the reason that these apps are unstable. I think when you're talking about the different, video transfer rates and the way that they're formatted, I mean, because if you ever have an issue, it's before an ad break, and it's because all these ads are authored in all these different ways, or some of them are created to stream on other services, and we'll do an additional buy into Hulu, and then you're sitting here watching some random show that you want to watch on Hulu, and then all of a sudden Hulu hangs up, and it's like, oh, surprise, we were going to a commercial break. I can't imagine.
And I believe they're doing targeted ads too, because you do a profile on Hulu, so I believe they do targeted ads.
Right, which isn't that illegal, but we'll talk about that some other time, because profiling is wrong. Anyhow, but we still watch a lot of content on Hulu, and I quite like Hulu. It's weird though, because the thing that I actually should originally subscribe to Hulu for, which is Space 1999, is now available on, wait for it, Amazon Prime. So so there's an interesting segue. But right now I'm currently working my way through Justified for the third time on Amazon Prime. So I just find that we're just it's weird. I think that Disney Plus has us looking at the services in a more deep dive manner than we had been before, because our go-to is just Hulu. We just turned on Hulu and just watched some late night show or whatever. But I've noticed that I am digging further into the catalogs of all the different services because of the diversity of what's on the Disney Plus. But I find that just like with CBS All Access, I feel like I'm going to be waiting for something for Disney Plus. I go to it. We've been watching the Jeff Goldblum stuff. We've been watching that Pick of the Litter about the dogs that are learning to become seeing eye dogs.
Okay.
So, we're watching a lot of that, but I'm watching a lot of the newer content. I'm not really getting that far into the catalog as much as I originally thought. I went back and rewatched some Clone Wars episodes, specifically for certain things because of what happened in The Mandalorian.
I need to do that, by the way.
Yeah, and so I did that to kind of reacquaint myself with an interesting element. And then I've made my way through the original 80s Spider-Man cartoons and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends about twice. So I feel like I got my money's worth between The Mandalorian and that alone. And I have watched a lot of stuff on it, but I just find that it's weird because the Marvel movie I'm wanting to watch the most when I sit down to have something on is Infinity War. And Infinity War is on Netflix.
Okay.
It's kind of a weird thing. It's like this content's all over the place. So
yeah.
Maybe in a few years when everything balances out, it'll be different. But for me, in terms of the streaming wars, in terms of the sheer hours I spend watching stuff and the content I'm interested in, because I like really diverse stuff, I find that I'm spending more time perusing what's going on Amazon Prime and what's going on Hulu. So for me, the winner for 2020 in streaming wars is going to be a tie between Amazon Prime and Hulu.
Actually, you reminded me of something. The funny thing is, I don't have Amazon Prime, but actually Amazon Prime is going to be an honorable mention for me. And the reason is, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, since you pay for Amazon Prime, right? You're paying for it right now?
Correct, yes.
But IMDb recently, and we haven't talked about IMDb as a player in the streaming wars. I just never got around to it. But are you aware that IMDb does actually have content now? Like they actually do have movies and shows on the IMDb site?
Yes, and I think you can watch them kind of through Amazon Prime or something, because I've been seeing it promoted on Amazon Prime. Exactly,
and that's my honorable mention because I actually did that. I actually downloaded the Amazon Prime app so I could watch some of the IMDb content, which is free. A lot of people don't know that. It's kind of one of those things. It's kind of almost the opposite of ESPN's Plus, is kind of situation. So there's actually some free content on Amazon Prime now if you know where to find it. And I think that's cool. And it's funny to me they haven't really promoted it as far as I saw. Like I found out actually through somebody on Twitter because they were watching Dune. Dune was on it for a while, and they were watching Dune and they were talking about it, and I was kind of going back and forth like, oh well, it's kind of a pain because I don't really like to do the whole Chromecast thing that much. Just not that into it. And then she told me, well, you can go on to Amazon Prime and log in through there. And sure enough, yep, you can go on Amazon Prime and you can find, you have to dig through it a little bit because there's channels on Amazon Prime, right? There's actual content from other providers besides their own stuff. And it's interesting. Yeah. So yeah, I want to make that as sort of an honorable mention because I think that's cool. I think it's cool that Amazon Prime does have some free content.
Well, and I want to add an honorable mention for me is going to be Pluto TV. You had mentioned it a couple of times, and I have been watching stuff on Pluto TV from time to time. Mostly I've been streaming just the different news channels. However, I have kind of perused other things, and I was shocked to see it. But they had the country music, the CMT channel, whatever, had Legend of the Lone Ranger on a loop or something. And I was like, that is crazy. The Clinton Spilsbury, John Barry Lone Ranger. I don't know how else to describe it. The one that's got Christopher Lloyd in it as the villain. Yeah, they had that like almost on a loop. And I ended up for a couple different nights while I was working, I just had it on. I kind of enjoy that film. It's a horrendous mess, but
it's also controversial because the producers, if you remember, as I remember as a kid, my dad was a big Lone Ranger fan. It was controversial because they went after Clayton Moore, the original TV Lone Ranger.
Yeah.
As far as doing appearances, kind of similar to what they did to Adam West at one time. When the Batman movie was coming out, the Michael Keaton one. They basically did a cease and desist on Clayton Moore appearing as the Lone Ranger.
Right.
Which was really, really mean and nasty because that was the way he was making his living, and he was actually very popular. Like I saw him on an episode of The Greatest American Hero where they were doing that, and it's like it was just a mean-spirited thing to do to him because he was somebody that was kind of beloved and like an icon, and it was just kind of a mean-spirited thing that they did. So I always think of that when I think of that Lone Ranger version because I remember even as a kid being aware of that because my dad was really angry about that.
Well, and they did a version of that story and had him on an episode of Highway to Heaven. I remember seeing him on Highway to Heaven. I
think he got that work because of that. People were upset and they were like, what I mean? Because like I saw him on The Greatest American Hero, and I don't remember that one. It was like, I think some people were just like, they really, dicked this poor guy. You know what I mean? So it was, but I've always kind of enjoyed the film for the John Barry score. It's one of those things that they've never re-released like in any format beyond the LP. And I don't have a record player, but there's just something I've always enjoyed about that score. And I like the fact that they it's the classic Lone Ranger trappings, and they kind of just update it a little bit. And it should have worked, except for the fact that I think the producers doomed themselves in a lot of different ways because they also dubbed over the main actor who's playing the Lone Ranger. All of his dialogue is dubbed by someone else, all of it, because apparently they felt like that his voice didn't sound very manly, so they went out and got someone else and they redubbed all of his dialogue. So if you're ever watching that movie and you're like going, something just doesn't seem right, well, that's what it is. I actually listened to this actor. He's mouthing the words and someone else is actually speaking them. It's a weird film. It's a very weird film. You should check it out because I have Pluto TV as well.
Yeah, but they had it on a loop. It was really weird, and I was like, so I just turned it on. So that's going to be my honorable mention. Is going to be Pluto TV because I keep finding really unusual things on there. Like there was a Blondie cartoon at one point, apparently. The comic strip. And that was on some kind of retro cartoon channel. I had that on for like 30 minutes one night because I was just in utter shock. I was like, who thought this was a good idea? And I was just sitting there watching this thing unfold. And I could recognize almost all of the cartoon voices. And I was like, what channel was this on? Who was watching this? This is weird. So Pluto TV gets an honorable mention because there's some pretty out there, interesting stuff on there if you take the time to peruse it. That'll be my honorable mention for 2019.
Well, I think it's always good for us to promote the free content. You know what I mean? Anybody that does the free content, it's always good for us to mention them. The other ones, like I said, there's Crackle. There's Tubi, which the Occupants feature film is on. There's a few others. I'm drawing a blank, but yeah, it's always good to mention the guys that give free content. How about the worst? Who do you think is the loser, at least of 2019 in the streaming wars?
Okay, so is it Apple Plus? Is it Apple TV? What's it called?
Apple Plus.
Yeah,
that's
Apple
mine
Plus.
too, by the way. Yeah, I think they're the loser of 2019.
Yeah, they. I don't know. It's weird because they finally started promoting that Snoopy and Space show. I've finally seen some stuff for it.
Really?
Yeah.
I still haven't seen anything for it.
It's just, yeah, at the end of the day, it's just I don't know. It's just not enough. I don't mean to be mad well, not mad, but, unnecessarily mean to Apple Plus, but it just doesn't appeal to me. But
there's no buzz either. I mean, we're talking about some high profile shows, with with
right.
Jason Momoa. We're talking about Ron Moore's film For All Mankind, right?
Yeah.
Ron Moore. I mean, I thought that was going to be like, really something. Like, I thought people would really kind of flock to that,
Right.
And I just don't hear anything. The only one I hear anything about is the morning news one or whatever, the one with Jennifer Aniston. And I could care less about that. I mean, that doesn't appeal to me at all. That's the only one I've heard anything, because we covered in a previous Streaming Wars segment, they did get a Golden Globe nomination for that show. But the other shows, I don't hear anything about them. Nothing.
Well, and see, that comes back to, again, one of my winners, tie winners for 2019. That takes me back to Amazon Prime, because if you want to talk about a show with a lot of accolades and awards, Marvelous Miss Maisel is a great show. That's not a show that should appeal to me, but I love that show. That show is really great.
Do you watch The Expanse?
I am going to start it. I have not started it yet.
That's heavily promoted by the fandom menace. Like Doomcock loves that, Nerdrotic loves it, and I've never seen it. I've never seen The Expanse because I don't have the pay version of Amazon.
Well, and that's one of those things. It's like I found myself originally going to Amazon primarily for like movies and stuff that we were like purchasing or watching through the service. And then on Amazon Prime, I was watching mostly the TV stuff, and The Expanse, for whatever reason, just slipped past my radar, because I was watching, like, what was it, Bosch or whatever, about the detective. Of course, I've mentioned before, we're watching Marvelous Miss Maisel. I watched the first season of The Tick. There's been a lot of stuff on Amazon Prime that I've watched and I've enjoyed. But there's just so much stuff sometimes that things just kind of, they can easily slip by you if you don't hear people talking about them. And I hadn't heard a lot of people talking about Expanse. It's like, for example, like I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about Lost in Space, but that's a great show.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it either. But like I said, I mean, I follow Nerdrotic and Doomcock quite a bit, and they promote The Expanse like crazy. They love that show. I mean, it's kind of funny to see them like really promoting something that they say is awesome. I've never seen it. I probably won't, because I don't know if I'm ever going to get Amazon Prime, the pay version, especially when I'm doing all this other stuff. That's kind of one of the issues with the streaming wars, is you kind of have to pick and choose. What am I going to do? You know what I mean? Because it's expensive. Like that YouTube TV, that's $40 a month. A lot of content for YouTube TV, but that's $40 a month.
Yeah.
That's significant. Over the course of a year, that's several $100s. So yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, I agree with you as far as the worst of 2019, but it's kind of funny, because not only are we the end of a year, we're at the end of a decade, and we are going to be going through the 2020s. And I think as far as the actual winner of the streaming wars, I'm kind of making this prediction, and this is like 10 years off. I think Apple might take the decade, just because of their cash. You know what I mean? I've said this before. I think that their tactic is going to be to kind of outlast everybody else, outspend everybody else. And I think they might end up being the winner ultimately of the decade, even though I don't think they're going to win 2020. I don't think it's going to happen that quick. There's still more services that are going to be coming out. There's still more players coming out. But yeah, I do think that they might actually, even though I think they're the loser of 2019, I think they might actually end up being the winner for the coming decade.
Well, I'm gonna say I don't agree with that. can see what you're saying in terms of like they've got a great war chest, so they should be able to outlast everyone. But I'm still a big believer in content wins out the day, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen when Warner Brothers walks into the fray. They don't really have like a big presence yet. They're going to visit HBO Max or whatever still hasn't hit yet. We've got Universal still on the horizon. So I'm not going to predict who I think that far out just because I don't have a real feel for it. But I'm going to be honest. I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to content. And I think it's going to be a backyard bare knuckle knife fight between Universal, Warner Brothers, and maybe with Disney there in the middle. And I think it's going to be about who's got the best content at the end of the day. That's what I honestly personally think, because Warner Brothers has got a tremendous catalog of films besides the obvious stuff that I love, like the Superman films and the Batman films and whatever. Yep. Besides that stuff, hopefully being on the service, I mean, they've got a tremendous catalog of classic films, and then so does Universal. And Universal has some tremendous IP that they could develop into streaming-only shows that no one's even touched or done anything with. And then there's a lot of really great IP floating around that someone could buy. There's been a lot of talk about Stargate. That could be an incredibly valuable franchise. It already has a lot of content. Someone could take that off of MGM's hands for a nice little sum of money and turn it into something that could eclipse all of this stuff if they produce it and take care of it and cast it right. So I don't know. I think the one thing we can definitely be assured of as we move in from 2020 into 2030 is a lot of change. And, there's all these different, virtual reality things and stuff that seem like I hear more and more people talking about, like the Oculus and all this kind of stuff. So who knows? There might even be some weird content that we even haven't seen yet where it puts you in the show.
Yeah, that's true.
So we'll see. We'll have to see what happens. Everything's changing at such a rapid pace. I feel weird to try and predict that far out. But I can see what you're saying. I mean, that could be how Apple wins, is by creating something that's a virtual TV show, that you kind of plug yourself into. So we'll have to see. Ironically enough, though, the IP most, I think, poised to do that would actually be Avatar, though. And that would actually be through Disney Plus. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. It's going to be curious to see how this unfolds. So,
well, I do predict for 2020 that the one that I'm kind of interested to watch. I mean, I think HBO Max is kind of obvious, but at the same time, I think the one to really watch is Peacock, the Universal one. And I say that because it's ad-based. And we did a previous segment where we talked about how, large companies that do ads could affect the streaming wars. And they could really affect Peacock because they don't, they with some of these streaming services like Netflix, which is the current dominator by hundreds of millions of subscribers, they don't have ads. So it seems to me that some of these big companies could end up being real contenders in the streaming wars, and Peacock could really be that model for them. You know what I mean? Right. And they could end up with a lot of money because it's about seeing trends, right? And when Coca-Cola starts to realize, well, everybody's now going over to Disney Plus or Netflix or Apple Plus, and none of them have ads, I think they're going to end up saying, hey, we need to put some real money in the ones that are doing ads.
Right.
So I think for 2020, the Peacock could be one to really watch for the streaming wars just because of that.
Right. And it'll be interesting, too, because, for example, I see where people are trying to find a way to take that ad money and then put it into shows. Like, I'd have to say the most personally visually offensive thing I've watched, I'm going to nominate for the year, was an Underground 6 movie on Netflix. My wife and I had it on because we kind of like Ryan Reynolds. And man, talk about egregious product placement. I mean, I was just like, are you kidding me? There's a shot where there's a Captain Morgan bottle on a boat. And the only thing that was missing was someone behind them doing the captain pose. That's all it was missing. And they lingered on it forever. And it literally looked like an ad shot. And it turned out it was like a Michael Bay production. But man, what a mess. What a mess of a film. I still have, in all honesty, no idea what that was about. It had a really interesting turn a boat into a magnet sequence, which was kind of cool. But other than that, it's like, you know, it's one of those things, like, as an action film, it had it was kind of interesting, but at the same point, it was just kind of just too, I don't know. It just didn't work. It's just like the Ben Affleck one they did earlier. I tried to watch all that. It's the thing with Netflix. It's like these original movies they try to do, they just don't work. Like their shows, their actual shows, a lot of them are really good. But then whenever they try to do the movies, I'm just kind of left scratching my head. It's like, this should work, but for some reason it doesn't, and I don't understand why.
Incidentally, have you seen Witcher yet?
No, I have not, because my wife has zero interest in watching it. And
really?
So yeah. So if I watch it, I have to watch it on my own, and right now there's just too much other stuff occupying my time. I mean, I should not.
She doesn't think Henry Cavill is dreamy?
I don't know if it's the contacts or the white hair or what, but no, it's clearly not working for her. I'm interested in it because to me it looks like a D&D television series. You know, a ranger type character. He has magical abilities, and it just, to me, it looks like a D&D show. It looks like it might be kind of fun. I know everyone else is comparing.
Now that's a show that'd be very difficult to do product placement in.
Yes, it would be. The Captain Morgan model would be really obvious. Especially with Henry Cavill behind it doing the stance, the captain's pose, drinking the anyhow. But no, I haven't seen any of it yet. As for example, like Lost in Space, I haven't had a chance to start Lost in Space yet either. But I've been incredibly busy. There's just been a lot going on, and you know, and the thing I've had on while I've been busy, I've just had Justified on in the background because I actually watched the last season. I hadn't seen it, and I'd kind of forgotten all about it. And I went back and I paid attention and actually watched the last season of Justified. And I really, really like that show a lot. It's very much it's an older show. For if anyone's familiar with it, it's kind of like a modern day Western. It stars Timothy Olyphant. It's got Walter Goggins, Joel Carter. It's just a great cast. It's a fun show. It's not like your usual cops show, and it's not really like a procedural. It has kind of like a through line. And it's just really fun. And so I've been kind of making my way through Justified again because I was curious. I was like going, does the last season really tie up all this stuff that I think it should? So I've been kind of having it on in the background and kind of paying attention to it every once in a while it's on. And I've always been impressed with that show. I really liked it. So that's kind of what I've had on, because the other shows really require I actually sit down and focus and pay attention to them. And I just haven't had a lot of time for that. And then plus I watched the last episode of Mandalorian like 2 times, and then I watched this sequence 2 times. And so I burned a lot of time just on the Mandalorian. So it's all Disney Plus's fault.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Did you have a specific prediction for 2020? Were you thinking HBO Max, or what do you think might be the real one to watch for next year?
Well, I think for next year, I think the ones to watch, I think HBO Max, I think Peacock from Universal, and I think Disney Plus. I think one of them is going to emerge. But the thing is, like right now, I kind of want to say Disney Plus because of all the Marvel content. And if they can actually get their Star Wars shows in the pipeline while the buzz is still there for Mandalorian and kind of keep that going, you know, I think they have a very good foothold right now because, like I said, to me, content is king. But then, you know, Universal's got an incredible catalog. Warner Brothers has got an incredible catalog, as well as, you know, if, you know, I keep thinking back, it's like if Warner Brothers wanted to develop some of this stuff as streaming only content, including Universal, you know, they had, you know, at the end of the day, it's going to turn to how much these companies want to sink into, you know, bolstering, you know, their offerings with this new stuff. So I think it's going to shake out between the 3 of them. If Disney doesn't wait too long on having something, because I think that's why WandaVision was moved up. I think that Disney's kind of realized that with the end, you know, Mandalorian coming to an end, they need that new content to keep people hooked. You know, they need that next water cooler show while they work on the next season of Mandalorian.
It does seem like there's quite a gap in significant new content right now on Disney Plus, now with the Mandalorian wrapping up. And
that's kind of the big shocker. I'm really kind of surprised they didn't have anything in the pipeline. So as soon as Mandalorian wraps, they can immediately go, okay, such and such is starting up next week. You know, so you have a new show to watch every Friday, and you can talk about this with your friends. And because if they had a Marvel show ready to go, like if Falcon and Winter Soldier was starting this, you know, tomorrow, you know, as Mandalorian ends, they would keep that buzz going. But there's nothing. There's nothing. And then I sit back and I look and I go, well, you know, look at Netflix. Netflix has got the next season of Lost in Space. They've got Witcher. You know, there's Carnival Row on Amazon Prime. You see, like there's that's the problem. There's so much other stuff to pull people away. And that's kind of why I keep saying content is king. Yeah. You don't have to have the same kind of show. You just have to have enough interesting shows. I know that's why a lot of people are betting on Netflix, to be honest, to kind of somehow weather through this if they can survive the amount of debt that they're burying themselves under. So we'll see. We'll see. If Disney Plus can leverage the momentum they have right now, I think they're a good contender, you know, to kind of come out 2020 on top. But I think the introduction of HBO Max and Universal makes that problematic, which is why I think it's going to be a three-way, you know, back alley, you know, bare knuckle brawl.
Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that.